Cool. So for everybody who's logging in, if you look down below the chat, there's a little button that says chat mode. So if you have a question for Mr. Randall Standridge here and you want him to answer your question, you need to mark it as a question. So make sure that you're in Q&A mode, and that way we'll get a little red dot by your question. So you guys can start inputting those now, and hopefully we'll have enough time to get to everybody's questions. And it's okay if you don't have a specific question, because I actually have some in mind already. So if you want to, be sure to, again, check the chat at the bottom. There's the Q&A mode. Make sure you mark your chat as a question, and that way we'll be able to go down and make sure that Randall answers. Do you want me to call you Randall or Mr. Standridge?
Oh, no, Randall's fine. I mean, I'm not super picky, so.
Okay,
what's
perfect.
What's funny is I think there's a lot of misconceptions sometimes that like all composers have doctorates, which they don't, because I don't. Like I just have a master's, and I'll get called Dr. Standridge all the time, and I'm just well, I mean, but it's so. I'll get called doctor, and I was like, no. It's just, I mean, you can just call me Randall. Like that's fine, no, I'm not standing on any type of formality or anything.
Awesome. Well, are you ready to answer some questions? We have some already in the bank here. So, your first question: how long have you been composing music?
How long have I been composing? Well, I'll give you two answers to that. So, first of all, just in general, as a hobby, I actually started writing music pretty young. I grew up in a fairly musical family, and in particular, my middle brother. In the Standridge brothers, there's three of us. There is my oldest brother Ronnie, and then my middle brother Scott, and then I'm the baby. I'm the youngest. And my middle brother Scott was an instrumentalist. He played guitar. Plays guitar, but he's still alive. Plays guitar. And he, would teach me things, and I didn't really take to guitar really well, but he started teaching me some things on piano just by ear. And so we would, jam and play together. And of course, I mean, I just eventually started kind of messing with writing my own tunes and things. And that was probably when I was about 10 or 11. And then, it became kind of a creative hobby of mine. I just enjoyed creating melodies, creating harmonies. Then when I started in band, I started writing things more like formally. The very first piece I ever wrote was a percussion ensemble for me and my friends called Shark Attack. I wrote it when I was in ninth grade. That sounds like something a ninth grader would write. It was not good, but at the time I was very, very proud of it. Now professionally, when I was in college, I started writing, some more mature things, and I was very fortunate to have some very supportive college band directors, Dr. Tom O'Neill and Mr. Ed Alexander, who would play through some of my music, give me very critical feedback. And plus I was taking lessons at the time with Dr. Tom O'Connor. And so all of that came together to, help me start writing more music. So like as an amateur when I was really young, and then more professionally towards the end of my college career. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
There we go. That's that. All right. So lots of people are really liking your pieces like Darklands March and Ruckus, and they're wondering, where do you get inspiration for your music, and what inspired you to write music? So talk about your inspiration.
Well, inspiration, I always tell people, or I've been told that I suffer from an overactive imagination, and that's not true. I enjoy every minute of it. But I don't know. I mean, for me, inspiration comes from a lot of places. Sometimes it will be just an idea like a title. I know that sounds really unromantic and really like lame, but it's the truth. Like I might think of a cool title. A great example is my piece, The Witching Hour. I just thought, I haven't seen a piece called The Witching Hour, and what would that sound like? And so I started playing with these kind of, horror movie sounds and things like that, kind of really gothic. So sometimes things like that. Sometimes it'll come from, I'm a big reader. I'm a total bookworm. I read all the time. And I might read a phrase or, have something with some characters or a situation in a book that inspire me. I do a lot of outdoor activity, hiking and things like that. And I really love being out in nature. So of course I get inspiration from that. But if I had to pick the number one thing, honestly, it just comes from the music itself. One of the things I do as a ritual every day is that I start my day with improv. I get down. I have a piano that I full 88 key piano, electronic piano that I have at my desk, and I start my day with about 30 minutes of just improving and kind of starting to create new ideas. To me, one of my big philosophies about music is that music has to work 100% on its own aesthetic. Meaning that, like, you can have the best story behind a piece of music, but if the music itself is not good, then I don't care how good the story is. It's just bad music. So if I had to pick my biggest inspiration, it's really just the sound of the music itself, the way the chords interplay, the rhythm, the texture, the structure. So even when I have a great story behind a piece, I definitely take a step back from it and just examine the aesthetic. Like, is this a good piece of music on its own with no story? So mainly just the musical sounds.
Nice. So your next question is, how long on average does it take you to write a piece of music?
How long does it take me to write a piece of music? I always give people this answer, and they sometimes they think I'm being a smart aleck, and I'm really not. But the answer is until it's done. And the reason I say that is because each piece has such a different life of its own and different trajectory and journey that it goes through that it varies wildly. Just to give you an example, I wrote a piece a few weeks ago called Starfire Fanfare, and it's a beginning band piece, grade 1, but so not super complex, but it took me about 2.5 hours to write. So not very long at all. Meanwhile, I've got another piece that I wrote last year called Stonewall 1969, and it took me about 3 to 4 months to write. So you've got this kind of big range in there. If I had to say on average, it takes me between a week to a week and a half for a piece, sometimes less, sometimes a little more, but that's the average.
Excellent. I want to know about your big grade 5 pieces. They probably took quite some time, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're always a little more complex, but you'd be surprised. I mean, sometimes things just fly out of your imagination, and then sometimes you have to. I mean, I've had grade 2s that I've had to really work on. So each piece is just really unique.
Peyton asks, what are all the instruments that you play?
What are all the instruments I play? Well, I was a band director for 12 years. From 2001 to 2013, I was at Harrisburg High School, well, actually not even just high school, just Harrisburg schools in Arkansas. And I was for 8 of those years, I was the band director. Like, no help, no feeders, no anything. I mean, I taught the beginners, the junior high band, the high school band, the jazz band. I mean, tag, I was it. The point being, I had to get good at all the instruments, or at least up to a certain degree. I mean, I would certainly not call myself a professional on all of them, but I could play them. So like all of the band instruments I'm decent at. Obviously percussion, is my big strength. That's my main instrument. I'm weirdly good at flute. I took to flute like that. Same thing with trombone and euphonium. They just really fit my mouth structure and jaw structure, and they were pretty easy for me. My hardest ones in band, I am really not good at double reeds, which is a shame because I love the sound of double reeds, but you would not love the sound of me playing them. I am awful. And I can teach it. I can get around the fingerings, but I'm not good. Like it's just not a good situation. Aside from the band instruments, I can play piano relatively well. I mean, I'm certainly not a prodigy, but I'm good at it. I can play a little bit of guitar, not great, and that's something I'm practicing on. And my next instrument I want to learn, no kidding, I am dying to learn the accordion. My family is Germanic, a few generations back, so we came from Germany, and I love polka music. I love that kind of Bulgarian dance sound that the accordion is so good for, and so I'm hoping to learn that at some point.
Excellent. So somebody else asked, what do you want people to feel with your music? What is your end goal in a composition?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, okay, no worries. And for what do I want people to feel? Well, I mean, obviously that'll be different from piece to piece. For instance, I've got a piece out called The Nine that has a highly emotional story behind it. And again, I tried to make the aesthetic of the piece convey that emotion. I wanted people to feel sorrow, rage, triumph, all these big emotions. But then other times, like with my piece Adrenaline Engines, I just want people to feel excitement. The big thing is I want them to feel something. I want them to be emotionally or aesthetically affected in some way, because if it doesn't do that, then that piece is not connecting with the audience or with the players more specifically, because typically if the piece is being played in a boring manner, it's because the players are not engaged. And if the players are not engaged, then I did not do my job. And so I just want people to feel something. And the biggest thing is to feel that joy that music brings, which is really hard to put into words, because again, I think of music as being pure music, just this aesthetic of rhythms and notes and timing and colors. And there's something about that just gets to you. I know I'm bringing up a lot of my pieces, but I'm just trying to, give examples. I've got this piece out that I love. I would put it in my top 5 things I've ever written, called Where Words End. It's just a grade 2. The piece is not about anything. It's literally just, it's just music for music's sake. And in fact, here's a funny story about it. It's published by FJH, and for those of you that don't know, the band editor at FJH Music is Brian Balmages. And he and I are friends. He's one of my favorite people in the world. But when I submitted that piece, its original title was just Untitled, which I thought was cool because it was kind of evocative. And, it described the piece because the piece wasn't about anything. And I'm going to tell you what, he hated it. And I mean, hated it. Would not let me publish it with that name. So we changed it to Where Words End. But anyway, going back to the point, again, that piece is not about anything. And the first time I heard the recording of it, the live recording of it that they sent from FJH, I just burst into tears. And to this day, I cannot explain why. Like, I can't even explain the emotions. It wasn't sorrow. It wasn't joy exactly. It was just this reaction to the aesthetic. So I want people to feel something. I want them to feel some type of musical, emotional reaction to the music.
Well, we're fielding tons of questions, so I'm going to try and pick out some of the more asked ones. So, of your Darklands set, your Darklands series, which is your favorite and why?
Darklands. Oh my gosh, that piece is, and you can stay on camera if you want to. By the way, that's fine. The Darklands. The Darklands thing is kind of like, for a few years, it was the bane of my existence. Because I made the mistake of releasing it out of order, because, like Darklands March got released first, and then Dark Heart, which is part 5, and then Darklands Legends, which was the middle movements. So I got lots of questions about that as it was getting created. But back to the question at hand, my favorite movement, if I had to pick my absolute favorite, it's the second movement, which is the Prince Loon movement. Which it's I don't know, it's quirky and it's fun and it's kind of dark and has this orchestral feel, but it's still very achievable for middle school. And I like it. And in fact, hang on just a second. The Darklands thing is actually based on some stories that I've written and some paintings and things. And I've got one of the paintings right here. This is actually the painting of Prince Loon. So yeah. So yeah, kind of terrifying. And yes, incidentally, I totally painted this. Like, this is not, I hired somebody else. Like, I totally did that. But anyway, so that's my favorite movement, because it's just, I don't know, it's very quirky, and it doesn't sound really like anything else I've written, which makes me really proud too.
Very cool. So several people have asked, what is your process for composing? Where do you start, and how do you kind of craft your music?
Well, of course, as I mentioned before, each piece kind of takes on a life of its own. But if I had to just kind of generalize, which I will, it always starts for me with just improv. I start on my piano. I start sometimes on Finale, which is the notation program I use, or even on GarageBand or Logic. And I just play with sounds, and I see what sticks out to me, what seems to go together. So that's always the first step. The next step, I will do what I call a sketch, which is where I'll take melodies, fragments, and kind of create the overall structure of the piece to make sure that it flows really well. And the good thing about doing that, for those of you that are studying to be composers out there or might already be composers, the good thing about doing that is that it saves you a lot of time. Because I think sometimes people just want to go to full orchestration immediately. And I understand the urge, because, you really want to hear what this is going to sound like. But I do the sketch first, because then once I create the sketch, I listen to it a lot of times. I make sure the timing of effects and color changes and things are appropriate. And then I cut out anything I don't need. And I usually trim between 10 to 20% of a piece before even starting into full orchestration, because in my opinion, most band music is too long. And I don't I don't mind long pieces. Like, I don't mind, pieces having, breadth and depth. But what I'm talking about is like unnecessary repetition, or things that don't really develop, or things like that. And I'm not saying I've never been guilty of that, but I do try to avoid that. And so I'll cut out a lot of stuff. And then once I have the sketch fully in place, I'll do a full orchestration of the sketch, which I call my first draft. Then I'll usually go through 2, 3, or 4 drafts, and I'll let other people listen to it. I'll get some feedback. I will let the piece sit for a while. I usually let it sit for about a week before I touch it again. That way I can listen to it with, fresh ears and not be so in the middle of the process. And then it becomes the final draft. And then if I'm publishing it, of course, I have to submit it to my publisher or editor and get their feedback, which oftentimes is very just invaluable. I mentioned Brian Donlodges is one of my editors. He is fantastic to work with. I also work with Robert Sheldon, he has got the sharpest eye and ear for music I've ever encountered in my life. The first time I submitted a piece to him, he was like, "Oh, Randall, this is great. Here's a few suggestions." And I got back 7 pages of notes about the piece. So he's the real deal. Like, he's awesome. And then I also work with Ron Allen at Winger Jones and Walter Cummings at Grand Mesa. And their input before that final, submitting it to the public is always just great to get a fresh set of ears on it.
Walter's my neighbor.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah, I ran. I actually social distanced myself from him on the trail the other day. I was running and he was hiking, and we came around each other and we're like, social distance.
Yeah.
All right. So these are kind of three questions all together, but maybe you can help us out with this. Can you show us a song in progress, and what are you currently working on? And would you ever write something about current events, the kind of situation that we're in now?
Well, as far as showing you, I'm going to be honest, I don't know how to screencast. So I wish I could, but and also, one of the problems with that is a lot of what I'm writing right now is for commission, and the commissioning parties get like first rights to them. So, I do apologize. I will say though, if you want to see some really new stuff, one thing I'll be doing, I've already done a little bit today, and I'll be doing more later today, as I'm uploading my new releases for next year to my YouTube channel. So, please feel free to check those out. And also, if you want to see a little bit of my process, I've made public a couple of playlists. One is when I finished the Darkland series, I did a kind of a vlog, a video blog of the process that showed like the sketch, exactly what I'm talking about, the sketches, the ideas, and things like that, and going through the process. So even though I don't have anything like that I can show you right now, please feel free to check out that. There's one for the Darklands, and there's one for the the Frogs Consortium. Which was something totally else. And the Frogs one is actually, in my opinion, a little bit more in-depth, like the video blogs are. So you might find that interesting. And again, it's on my YouTube channel, so please, check that out and click subscribe and notifications, But anyway, writing about current events, like what's going on right now. I'm not shy about doing that. I've written a few pieces that I would say are socially conscious. I've written, like I mentioned, the piece "The Nine," which was about the it's about the integration of Little Rock Central High School in 1957, right in the middle of the civil rights movement, and it's highly emotional, very, very about the way we live as Americans. Same thing, that piece Stonewall 1969 is about the Stonewall riots of 1969, and sometimes it's even just small moments. One type of piece that I've been asked to write a lot is what I would call memorial pieces, when a student passes or a director passes or, something like that. And even though, the audience may not know this person, like it might not be a big American thing, these are small little slice of life moment for people that are really important. So would I write anything about what's going on now? Yeah, I would, if I had the right idea, because I don't believe in just sitting down to write something just because, like, oh, I'm going to write this. I think you have to have something to say. And since we're so right now in the middle of everything, it's kind of hard to get some perspective. I will say, I mean, and I'm not going to get super political, but the only thing I will say is that I think that piece, the 9, would be very appropriate for now, because it's about, the piece is not really, it's about that event in 1957, but it's also more universally about us trying to find our better selves and to always be our best selves. And when I think about what's going on now and what's going on in the last several years, politically in our country and in the world, I think it's very timely, because I think people are not getting the outside perspective of how their actions are affecting others, and how we are putting responsibility on big figures and leaders for our actions, when it really comes back to us. We have to choose how we act, and we have to choose how we affect the world and what we put into the world. And so I think good art always has that kind of commentary, because I think good composers who are good people kind of put that vibe into the world. And I'm certainly not the only one. There's a plethora of composers who put good thoughts and positivity into the world. And I just hope that I can be one of those.
Awesome. Okay, let's do a couple of really short answer questions, okay?
Awesome.
How much can you bench press?
How much can I bench press? Well, after a week away from the bench, I'm not sure now, but last time I was at the gym, I was maxing out around, my max I've ever gotten single bench was 310. And now it was not pretty. I did not make it look easy. It was very ugly, like snot flying, grunting and groaning, but I did get it. On a good day, I can usually do 1 or 2 reps at 300 to 305. That's probably going to go backwards a little bit over the next several weeks, because our gym is closed and everything, but that's my current max. Nice.
And what is your favorite time signature?
What is my favorite time signature? If I had to pick my absolute favorite without reservation, it's 7/8. I love writing in 7/8. Because it feels very natural to me. It's funny because you can always tell when a composer is comfortable in 7/8 and when they're not, just based on how it sounds. If they can make it sound natural and flow, then they really understand it. But you can tell when a composer is just like, by God, I'm going to put something in 7/8, and they don't feel it, and it's just awkward.
Okay. So what is your favorite? Oh, sorry. Who is your favorite composer?
Who is my favorite composer? I'm not kidding when I say this. I really don't have one. I'm more attracted to individual pieces. So there are pieces that I really enjoy. And based on that, I could give you some composers who I admire. Some of the ones are going to be very familiar to you. So obviously John Mackey. John Mackey is great. And I love a lot of his music. My very favorite band piece of all time is The Frozen Cathedral. I love that piece. I'm also a big Julie Giroux fan. She is her music is so beautiful and always so well written. And it's just, her orchestration is immaculate. In particular, even though it's one of her easier pieces, one of my favorite pieces of her is The Bonsai Tree. I just think it's a perfect example of great orchestration for a young band. But then I've got other composers I enjoy, like obviously John Williams, music, for movies. Danny Elfman, Elliot Goldenthal, who's not quite as well known, but his music's incredible. And also Bruno Coulet, a French composer for film, whose work is just incredible. For those of you that might know a few movies, he wrote the soundtrack for Coraline. And his music's just great.
That's a good soundtrack.
Yeah, it is a great soundtrack. And then obviously, some of the other greats like Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, just a bunch. So it's pretty broad. I can't really just pick one.
Okay. So lots of middle schoolers love your music, of course. High schoolers do too. Probably college people. But what advice can you give to middle school musicians who are striving to continue improving during this time at home?
Oh, that is a good question. And I can speak to this personally. So the big thing I think that you can do to improve during this time, and this is speaking as a band director, not as a composer, so educator head on now. The big thing you should focus on is learning how to practice. Now, not that you should practice, okay, because everybody knows you should practice. What I'm talking about is how to practice. Because in my experience going out and teaching private lessons, working with people, this is the number one problem I run into with band programs, is when you can tell that the students have not been taught a method of practicing. Do this, then this, then this, then this, to have a successful practice thing. One resource I would recommend, for me, this was a career-altering book. So band directors watching, if you don't get anything else out of this, get this book. It's called How to Make First Chair by Roberts. It is the best resource for teaching yourself or your students how to practice. So that would be one of the things there. And then the second thing I would say to students is to really put yourself on a schedule. You need to have a designated time every day that you're going to practice. Because like for me, when I said I could speak to this personally, one of the big challenges for me as a freelance composer, I work at home. You said, this is my house. This is part of my house, my office. I have to have an extraordinary amount of self-discipline every day, because it would be very easy for me to be like, oh, well, I need to work on this piece, but you know what? I'm going to go play Minecraft, or I'm going to go play, PlayStation 4, or I'm going to go play with my dogs. It would be very easy to do that. But I have to keep my goals and my long-term strategy in mind, and I make time for what's important to me every day. And composing is important to me. Becoming a better musician is important to me. Becoming a better educator is important to me. So I make time for those things every day. So I think this is a unique time we're in right now, where students can really find out what you're made of. Do you have it in you to have that self-discipline to get your schoolwork, your band work, everything done every day, and then still make time for your own interests, your own hobbies and things like that, and to find a good life balance. So that would be my best advice.
Nice. Our next question is kind of another two-parter. Have you had any jobs outside of music? And if you didn't work in music field, what would you work in?
Okay. So have I had any other jobs? Obviously, like I said, I was a band director, and then I've done this. My only other jobs I've really done was when I was working my way through college, and I worked in a grocery store. I was like a bagger. I did that, and I would do that. Sometimes I would run the cash register if they were really slammed. That was it. Very, very unglamorous. Aside from that, pretty much every other career I've had has been music related in one way or another. If I was not going to be a music person, I have a few careers that I might enjoy. One, because as you mentioned, like with the bench press thing, I really do love physical activity. I wouldn't mind being a personal trainer. I enjoy physical fitness, and the teacher side of me really enjoys seeing that improvement in people. So I think, being a personal trainer is a good mix of those personality traits as well. Aside from that, I actually wouldn't mind being a writer of some kind, whether it be fiction or working for a magazine or something, because I do enjoy writing quite a bit. And the same thing with photography. I do quite a bit of photography as a hobby, and so kind of that. So I'm definitely a fine arts guy. Aside from the whole personal training thing, the fine arts are really my passion.
Very good. So how much music theory do you use in your writing process? This is obviously a college major who's
yeah. Well, I have some pretty strong opinions about music theory. Now, here's the thing. Should everybody learn music theory? Yes, absolutely. And I use it quite a bit to get particular sounds, particular harmonic changes and things like that. And I think that's really good. I think it's good for everybody to learn that. There is a problem with the way some people view music theory, however. And that is that a lot of people, and I've been told this, because my pieces don't always follow, strict music theory or strict, ideas like that. And I'll get some college students, some, directors that will call you, hey, Mr. Shatters, this doesn't function like this. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know. But the thing with music theory is that music theory is just, it's just a language to talk intelligently about music and to understand its mechanics. But it is certainly not, nor was it ever intended to be, rules. You can tell when somebody is really stuck on music theory because their music is boring. Just boring. Now, I'm not talking about the masters like Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, because they were inventing all of that on the fly. But, in modern times, it's a little different. And so I just approach music theory as a language, and as a series of structures that you can use. It's like tools on a tool belt. You can pull out the classical sounding harmony and use it. You can pull out 12 tone if you want to. You can pull out pitch set theory and things like that. But there really are no rules. So it's just a language to use about music.
Cool. We're going to do maybe 5 more questions or so. And I want to tell everybody who's listening, not only thank you so much for coming and for participating in this Q&A session. If you guys like this, we can try and bring on more composers. And I'm going to download all of the chat window and send it to you, Randall, so that you can see the questions. And that way, if you want to, answer some via email, we can forward that to everybody who logged in today.
Okay,
so,
awesome. Or if you want to, I can make like a document, answer, select ones of them and send to you for I don't know if you can attach it to the thing or not, but if not, that's cool.
We absolutely can. So ideally, everybody's question will be answered. Fortunately, a lot of people have kind of these same pressing questions. So let's get to this one. It's about being a music teacher. What advice do you have for a future music ed major? And what are some books that you might recommend, or what are some books that you might recommend for music ed students? So speak to us about music ed students.
Okay, well, as far as the advice I would give you, that's a wide open window. The biggest thing I would say right now is you need to be learning how to impart the fundamentals of music to your students. Because I think sometimes, what really attracts, in my experience, what really attracts band students to want to teach is repertoire. There are certain pieces that they just loved, and it lit that fire in them, so they want to do this. And so I think a lot of music majors come to music education with actually being excited about repertoire. You have to get excited about the process of the fundamentals. You have to get excited about, how am I going to teach students a chromatic scale? How am I going to teach them to produce a good tone? How am I going to teach them how to tune? I think you need to really invest in that process, and do that. Second thing I would say, you need to be making a ton of contacts for mentors, whether it be college professors, people in your community that you'll teach in that you'll respect and whose programs are really good. Get out and watch them and invite them into your program once you're a teacher. One of the most powerful things I ever did was I invited 3 master teachers into my program, and they spent 2 days with me. On the first day, I watched them teach. And then on the second day, they watched me teach and then gave me critique about the way I was teaching. And I will say, some of the critiques were bitter pills to swallow, because I had to really take a look at myself and not be defensive and not be closed to input. But once I did that, I learned so much, and I became a better teacher, and my program became more successful. My students were happier. I was happier. So I think you have to be open to that criticism. And then the third thing I would say, most of you are not going to start in programs that are going to be playing grade 5 and 6 literature. You need to be getting very familiar with grade 1, 2, and 3 literature, and you need to find out what's good and what's not. Just be building up that knowledge of repertoire, so you're not floundering looking for something.
All right. In what ways do you approach writing for marching band differently from concert band, aside from the obvious instrumental choices?
Well, aside from the instrumental choices, the big thing for me is in concert band, there are no expectations. Like, a concert piece can be anything. It can be slow, it can be fast, it can be whatever. So it's actually a lot freer. But in marching band, especially in modern day, contemporary marching band, there are certain expectations. Now, there's a million ways to do them, but you have to have big, full ensemble moments. You have to have woodwind choir moments, brass choir moments, front ensemble, battery. You have to have moments to show off combos, solos. So there's a menu of things that you need to get through to get the maximum number of points. Now, you can be very creative about how you incorporate those things, but those things do have to be in there. Whereas in a concert band piece, I could have one woodwind choir section, everything else be 2D. And it's fine. Not that I would ever do that, because that'd be boring orchestration, but you could do that. So I think it's just the way I approach it is just making sure I'm checking boxes to make sure that my clients are as successful as possible.
Okay. What was the weirdest thing that ever happened to you while playing, writing, or conducting music?
What's the weirdest thing that ever happened to me? Okay, so this is a true story. And I apologize if it's a little bit like graphic. I was at an honor band in Texas during a summer one time. It was a summer band, and concert was going great. We were getting right then, and the last piece was this big fast thing. So of course, you know how sometimes they'll give guest conductors like a plaque or a certificate, something to say thank you. Well, they gave me this thing that was in this frame, and I'm standing there, and I go to shake the guy's hand and grab the frame. The back of the frame had this there was these metal things that closed the frame down, and one of them was really sharp, and I mean it slashed my hand open, and I mean we're talking about full on bleeding all over the place. Now nobody knew that to me because I just closed my hand real quick, and I had to think fast, so I just put my hand on the it was my right hand too. I put my hand on the stand that's in front of me and kept it there the entire time during the last piece and just conducted left-handed because I had to, because I was bleeding all over the place. And if I'd have conducted that hand, I'd have thrown blood on the flute section. And so that was, and then when I got done, of course, I was like, some people were wanting to come up and take pictures and shake hands. I was like, can you excuse me for a second? Went to the bathroom, took care of things, came back, just wrapped it up. And that was probably the weirdest thing that ever happened.
Wow. That's pretty epic and pretty graphic. What is the biggest reason why you think students should stay in band?
The biggest reason, well, there's lots of reasons. Let me give you a true story. So think about, where my career is now. I travel all over the place doing music. I've got this huge platform to speak to music students and directors and to get my aesthetic out there. When I was in 8th grade, I told my dad that I wanted to quit band. My natural talent had run out. I was getting frustrated because I was really having to work. And so I came, I'm going to quit. And my dad would not let me quit. And he was like, I don't want you to learn how to quit. And I think that's a very powerful lesson. There's going to be a lot of challenges in your life that you have to overcome. And I think music is such a great tool for learning that stick to it attitude. So on the one hand, I just think it teaches work ethic that is going to serve you for your entire life. If you look at everybody that's really successful in the world, they have work ethic. Okay, that's bottom line. They have work ethic. Second thing is music and the exposure to the arts just changes you as a person. I saw it when I was a teacher with my students. I know it for myself. It gives you more of a worldview, and I think more of an empathy and sympathy to other people and to other cultures. And I think that's really important as our world is shrinking. And what I mean by that, with the internet, with media, with everything, we are part of a much, much more interconnected world now. And I think that cultural sensitivity and empathy towards our fellow humans is really important. And I think the arts teach that. And lastly, just because it's fun, come on, it's band. Band is amazing.
Band is a cult. Band is a lifestyle.
It is.
Even if you aren't currently a band teacher or become a band teacher, it's still something that you have with you your whole life. I conduct a community band and love it. We have students from all over. Okay, so this might be a weird question, but it's a lifestyle question.
I'm fine with weird questions.
So they're wondering, do you have kids, and how many do you have if you do?
I do not have kids. I want kids. That's actually on the horizon in a couple of years. But when I made the change to being a full-time composer, there was a little bit of financial uncertainty. I pretty much knew things were going to be okay, but I didn't want to make. That was one big life change, right then. I didn't want to make another big one at that point. So that's on the horizon. But right now, I am the proud parent of 5 pets. I have 2 dogs on purpose and 3 cats on accident. The 2 dogs are just great. They were both rescue dogs. The cats, we had a neighbor up the street who basically had a cat hoarding problem and got evicted. And one of the cats escaped into our backyard, had a litter, had 3 kittens, and then she got run over. The mama cat got killed because we live right next to a highway. And so there were these 3 defenseless kittens that were just, they hadn't been weaned. They were, just, going to die if nobody did anything. And so we took them in. So we took in the cats, and it was way more cats than I was ever expecting to have. But I have to say, they're all really good pets. I mean, I'm not sorry we have them. It's just, but it is a lot of cats.
Sounds like it. Deathly allergic to cats myself. So, okay, back to a composing question. Have you ever had a moment when you're in the middle of writing a piece and you just blanked out and didn't know what to write? And if so, how did you get back into it?
Well, sometimes you do run out of like ideas at that moment, but I never really let that stop me, because my attitude is generally that I can always just erase what I wrote if I don't like it. So I always just keep writing. Like even if I know it's not good, I just keep writing, because I can come back and to me, not writing anything is worse than writing bad music. Because if you're writing bad music, at least you're keeping the creative process going. So if I ever run into that moment, I just start improvising, and I'm like, okay, what do I like? Or if I need to, I'll take a break from the computer for a little bit, and I'll go walk my dogs. I'll go, might go for a drive. Weirdly enough, I always seem to get my best ideas when I'm driving. Like that's just, I don't know what it is about the car environment, but I really get a lot of good ideas when I'm driving.
Okay. Have you ever written for solo instruments or a solo with accompaniment?
Oh yeah. I've written for a lot of solo things. I don't have a lot of them published, just mainly because of demand. I mean, like mostly what's been in demand for me now is full ensemble things. Although now I will say, and I'm not doing this for a plug, but while we're on that subject, I'm going to be putting together a consortium this week. I'll have it announced later this week. That is going to be, to help deal with the situation we're in right now and to help students continue to grow. I'm writing a series of solos, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for years, and like now just happened to be the perfect time. It's going to be solos that are going to be backed by like some EDM style tracks, like EDM, techno, and dubstep type sounds. Because to me, that's where music is now. Like I can only listen to so many solos with piano accompaniment. I want to hear something more modern. And so I've got this idea. I've been sketching on it this past week, and I'm going to be creating these pieces right now. So I'm going to be making a consortium available to people, to hopefully people enjoy it. And I think it'll be a neat creative project to help with this. So I've written that, or I'm going to write that. And I've written a few other pieces. Like when I was in college, you have to write a wide variety of ensemble styles to get a degree in composition. I think my favorite thing I ever wrote was this piece called A Faustian Sonata. And so it was based on the story of Dr. Faustus, and it was for clarinet and piano. And I really want to turn it into a sonata for wind ensemble and clarinet, because to this day, I still think it's a really good piece. So yeah, I write, and of course I write marimba solos, snare solos. I write lots of solos.
All right. So that kind of leads into this next question, which is kind of a two-part. One is, what are you doing and how are you dealing with this time during the pandemic, having to be kind of at home? And what would you recommend for any activities for students and teachers to engage in during this time?
Oh, that's a good question. As far as how I'm dealing with it, I'll just be very real. It's very up and down. As far as myself, I'm fine. I work from home anyway, so being at home all day is not that different for me. The only big difference for me is not going to the gym as much right now, because like I said, our gym is closed. And then also, I have a pretty active social life with friends, and so not being able to hang out with them has been, disappointing. Of course, my parents live 2 hours away, and they're in their 70s. So they're in that demographic that's highly susceptible to this pandemic. And the best way I can say how I'm dealing with it, like for me personally, I'm fine. I'm very nervous for other people on their behalf, because I know not everybody is in as fortunate a situation as I am to be able to work at home and to do all this, and to be at the age I'm at. And so it's very up and down. I've had moments this past week where I've been very upset, about things. And then other days where I'm like, okay, we can get through this, so I'm trying to just keep a positive spirit and, what I call walk the middle road, with caution, but optimism. And so as far as activities for people to engage in, if we're meeting school activities, I mean, obviously this is a great time to work on solos. And honestly, I would, if I were a band director right now, I would primarily be working on solo literature for the following reason. If you think about like low brass players, horns, people like that may not get the melody as much as like trumpets, flutes, and treble instruments. They will develop more right now by playing solo literature and things like that than they would by playing just a background band part. So I think this is a good opportunity for that. I think it's also a good opportunity for people to maybe delve into different parts of music we normally don't get to in band, music history, music theory, things like that. Just, examining those things. And, but at the same time, directors out there, I would keep it light. You've got to keep in mind the situation we're in. And getting one thing done well would be better than getting like 3 or 4 things done at a very poor level. Now, as far as just, fun things to do, I mean, I'm a big video gamer. Like I mentioned, I play Minecraft. I've got a PlayStation 4 and a Switch. So I'm keeping myself entertained that way. I am practicing my marimba on occasion. I'm writing a lot of music. I'm painting, drawing. I am making sure I exercise every day. I'm doing it at home, but I do that. And then I'm walking my dogs usually at least 2 or 3 times a day. And just trying to find, outlets for positivity. The one thing I would not recommend people do, number one, don't be glued to Facebook. And especially if you've got a lot of people on your wall that are just fighting with each other right now, because that's what I've got. And so I'm just staying off of it. And I would also not recommend just being glued to the news. Check it occasionally. I mean, we all do need to be informed, but it can become a point of being obsessive, and it's going to keep you upset. And I mean, yes, we all have reasons to be upset right now, but we've also got to find the best ways to make the best out of the situation. And I don't think keeping yourself in a constant state of upset is healthy.
Yeah, which is why we're doing this. So thank you for helping us all break up. Okay, two more questions, and then we're gonna be done. What is your longest time you've lasted on hardcore Minecraft?
What is the longest I have lasted on hardcore Minecraft? Oh gosh, I really don't know. I mean, it was a while. Because I'm pretty good at Minecraft. So I can build my forts, build all that stuff like that, and make sure I've got survival gear. But I will say that I think it was around. I had one character in World that I'd done for about 3 months on that, and of course, it was one of the creepers that got me. The things that hiss and explode. I was so mad. And actually after that, I was so disappointed because I created so many good like buildings and things that I was like, nope, never playing hardcore again because I don't want to lose all that stuff I made. So anyway, so about 3 months.
Wow, that's really good. My kids all play Minecraft as well. Of course,
it's great. It's great. It's great for inspiring creativity. It's great.
Yeah, it is for sure. Okay, last question, and all other questions will be sent to you, and you can type up answers if you like, and I'll make sure they get to everybody who registered. Awesome. They want some, and how did they say it? What are some signature expressions that you like to share in rehearsals or sayings from mentors in the past that help you? They want some meme-worthy.
Okay, I don't know if these are meme-worthy, but like some things that I would say. Let's say I'm trying to think, because you got to keep in mind, like I haven't taught in about 7 years. I've done honor bands, but I mean it's different from being in the classroom every day. But let's see, one of our big sayings when I was at Harrisburg, it wasn't a funny saying, but it was just I would always say out, there's no shortcut for, and the kids would finish repetition, because that was one of our tenets to develop muscle memory for good performance and for skills and things. So we would say that. I did have a lot of dad jokes that I would throw in, because one of my key personality traits that the kids seemed to like was my sense of humor. So like a student would ask to go to the restroom, and I was like, well, take your instrument. And they'd always look what I was like, well, they're like, why? I was like, so you can play the crap out of it. So anyway, yeah. So that's one of them. And like you always would get ready to start, a student would say, hold on, like they're hold on here because they're getting ready. And I would just like grab my stand and scream like that, just like panic attack, just to get a rise out of them. And just dumb stuff like that. I probably don't have any like big sayings, but the one that I end all my videos with isn't a funny one. It's just I always tell people peace, love, and music, because I really do believe that. I believe in putting good things into the world, and we make the world every day with our actions. And so I know that sounds really cheesy, but I genuinely do believe that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for this time. I know I got a lot out of this. I hope the people watching got a lot out of this. Everybody will get the replay, and I'll send you the questions, and we'll go from there.
And for those of you that might want to, follow what I'm doing and everything, just to give you the social media rundown, I have a very active Facebook page. I'm not accepting friend requests right now because I'm almost maxed out on friends, but please feel free to follow me. And I also have my composers page, which is separate on Facebook. Plus, I've got Twitter and Instagram, my YouTube channel, and then my webpage, which is www.randallstandridge.com. So feel free to go in there, and I hope anything I do or say has value for you as a performer and a player. And thank you for tuning in today and showing interest in my music. I am so thankful for my career. So to you directors and you students who have played and supported my music, thank you so much for being patrons. You are making my life fantastic, and I hope I'm returning the favor.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Randall. And we're going to go ahead and sign off for this one. Everybody have a great day and stay well.